Professor Hope Magidimisha-Chipungu is a regional and town planning academic at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She joins us now to talk about some of what we've just seen. I'd like to hear your views, Professor. What has been the cumulative effects of the recent heavy rains and floods on infrastructure, as we've seen in different parts of the country?
Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. The effect that we're dealing with, it's various, and it depends on the point in question and the type of the settlement we're talking about. Obviously, some affluent areas are well equipped and they're responding very well. And obviously, when you look at the other side of the coin, your informal settlement, the highly populated area in some of the township and some areas in the villages seem to be struggling. And this is because of the type of the infrastructure that is available in those particular areas and the quality, and in terms of the quality, the size, and the rate in which it's able to respond to the population in that particular environment, because we do have bulging of population in our urban environment or in our urban areas, and that's where we are finding that infrastructure is really struggling to cope. I've said this before, that in fact the infrastructure that we have in some of those informal settlements, it's actually either not planned at all, or else it's the infrastructure which is actually not meant for the population residing at that particular place. So that's what's happening. So you have a kind of two environment settings where you have the extreme of the have not and the have.
And I want to get to that point. Is there any evidence? I mean, South Africa has been a democracy for close to 3 decades now. And has there been any tangible progress on the segregated spatial planning of the past?
Yeah, I think that's a good one, because if you look at the segregation of the past, the most Black African people weren't allowed to be within cities, and that will break the barriers. So everyone can come to the cities as and when they want, and they can stay anyway if they can afford. So in terms of the racial segregation, I think we've made progress. But now we're dealing with another form of segregation, which is along the not racial line, but along the class and affordability. The question is, where can you afford to stay? Is your income adequate? And that form of segregation, because that then defines the kind of infrastructure that you have and the kind of the quality of life that you have. If you can afford to stay in some of the poshy areas with the well-maintained infrastructure, obviously you will have a better life, and you will experience South Africa differently compared to someone who's somewhere in an informal settlement or somewhere in the village with no services at all. So the progress has been made in terms of opening up cities, but not so much in terms of inclusive, in terms of including people from different brackets. We are lagging behind there, and there's a lot of work need to be done.
So bar the inequality in, as you say, what we're seeing in the urban and rural areas and the class divide, how much does the weak and unmaintained infrastructure influence how we recover from severe weather? And of course, the response to those who are affected, given, as you say, the more affluent areas tend to benefit more or better?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, especially if you're looking at the more affluent and the non-affluent areas. We've not done much in terms of obviously the infrastructure, but the issue maybe we're supposed to be talking about is what needs to be done in order to improve those areas. We obviously have to be creating cities which are resilient, and we have to be employing different or integrated strategies, both structural and non-structural, and of course what we call a natural solution or green solutions that we're supposed to be employing within those spaces in order to manage and sustain the current situation. As it is now, we have not done much, especially on those areas where people they cannot afford, and this is partly because everything comes at a cost, and we have been talking a lot about whether we should put the first world class kind of infrastructure in those environments or not. Can they afford to pay them or not? And the question is, where do you draw the line between affordability and saving life of people within South Africa? So I think we need to be talking about what kind of solutions we're supposed to be bringing in those environments and going forward.
So what kind of solutions should we be bringing? If we talk about the fact that the state of the water drainage systems in the country is in a terrible state, is that one of the solutions? What else should we be looking at?
Yeah, there are numbers of solutions that we can come up with, like I said earlier, on either structural or non-structural. And what one comes to mind here is that we have not, and I've been looking around most of our cities in South Africa, and of course this is not to say this is not happening at all, but we have to be coming up with innovative ways in trying to capture the water within open spaces, or in other words, the stormwater, we need to find a way to retain them somewhere in an open space. It's very ironic that we are having a lot of water in the form of rains, but at the end of the day, we find ourselves without water. The question is, can we capture this water in a way that is sustainable and in a way that is safe for the communities? So from an urban design, we are talking about trying to open up some of the open spaces and make sure that you accumulate water there and for use later. And we're not saying that is the only solution. That is one of the many solutions. We can also talk about issues around the early warning system that is well documented, and of course mapping those areas which are prone to flooding, and alert people, educate people that you cannot be staying here. I know for sure and for fact that there are a number of communities which were affected by floods because they were in the low-lying areas in the couple of months back, but they're still building in the same areas. What are you saying? We now know that actually those areas are prone for flooding. So we can't be encouraging people to build in those areas. So I think there's some education which is needed there and which we need to be doing. And of course, if we look at the issues from an urban planning perspective, we need to be coming up with urban planning or land use which are actually conscious of what is happening within our environment. We cannot just be designing our cities as if everything is normal. Things aren't normal, and we may be the first generation which is actually experiencing flooding, and we need to do something. So our approach towards planning needs to be nature-based to find the solutions around those areas.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us. Much appreciated. That there is Professor Hope Magidimisha-Chipungu, who's a town planning expert, and also speaking to us about the aging infrastructure and poor maintenance as it worsens with flooding.